Okay. I'm going to start in 1, 2, 3. A world that exposes and promotes bad behavior, immoral acts. The concept of immorality gives a platform to people who have done awful things. That is a faulty world panel that needs to be regulated, and that so that those immoral acts don't happen anymore. They're not promoted, and that literally purifies art, because then art is not going to come from people who have done bad things. But first of all, let's start off by defining the terms of the motion and making some clarifications. Right. So what does deeply immoral means? What does deeply immoral mean? It's people who have done things that affected the comfort, the safety, the well-being of people, or that promote harmful mentalities for the current state of the world. People who, as I've said, I don't know, have done sexual harassment, killers, like extreme cases like that, but also people who promote bad mentalities and that promote and expose some very bad behavior, like promoting racism, promoting homophobia, promoting all these things that are not considered ethical in our day-to-day life. No, thank you. So we're not referring only to monsters. We are also referring to people that have done questionable things, right? Artists. Let's look a bit at the motions actors, right? So artists, they want exposure. They want positive feedback. They become the work that they perform. They become the art that they want other people to consume. They're vulnerable. They expose everything that they have to show, right? But those artists are so influential. Those artists have platforms, and they are seen by so many people, right? Now let's talk about fans, people who are so invested in artists that they give the artist a platform, they support that artist, and they promote their mentalities by actually using them in their day-to-day lives. Our burden today is that we want a world where bad behavior is not encouraged, and the opposition's world, is not going to do that. No, thank you. We want a world that prevents bad behavior from happening. But now let's get into the argument. Right. So I'm going to present the first argument, and then my colleague on the second speaker is going to tell us about the second argument. The first argument is basically based on immorality, and the second argument on the long-term effects of consuming art done by people who have done immoral things. Essentially, when you consume someone's art, you give them a platform, as I said. You make them influential, you give them money. So all the financial benefits of that, they become more powerful in society because you give them a platform, you consume their art, they become more famous, so they have a bigger platform, they influence a bigger, vaster mass of people, right? Let's talk about examples, for example, like Shane Dawson, who is one of the biggest YouTubers ever, right? And he promoted blackface, racial slurs. He promoted racial slurs and. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Note that your side censors art because the artist did immoral actions, which means that symmetrically on both sides, we're going to censor art that of itself promotes bad actions and immoral actions. You have to tell us why, like, neutralized art carried out by bad artists is also going to be censored on your side, and why that's good.
It's totally censored on our side because, well, we have art and if you promote the ideas of the people, of the artists that are behind that art, then that art itself is going to become that person, right? So it's going to be representative of that person, which is not at all good, right? But going further into my argument, so you make that person influential. I was talking about Shane Dawson and how his platform was influenced, how the people that consumed his art were becoming him because of what his art was telling people. But he got canceled, and that's good. That's what needs to happen on our side of the house, right? That's what needs to happen in a moral world that promotes good things. But let's talk about some like extreme cases. So a person needs approval when talking about people who are who did very bad stuff. For example, they have sexually harassed someone, and they get positive feedback from the art that is consumed by a lot of people, right? So that offender, that person who did such a bad thing, he practically searches for excuses to excuse his actions, and sees that he gets positive feedback for the art that he created, and then he says, oh well, I'm forgiven, that means that my actions were not that bad, I'm gonna do them probably in the future. That's the world that the opposition proposes, right? Let's talk about how that art influenced the past, how it influences the present, how it influences the future, right? So we want to say that a very important point in this debate is that what kind of art, like what type of art is we want to not promote, to not consume anymore? We want to not consume the art of people who are already dead, who have influenced people. But the thing is that so if you promote the art of people who have died, so right, they you promote the mentalities, you set the groundwork for something very, very bad to happen, because you build the groundwork of a bad scenario, right? Right, and the past influences the present, so you need to change the mentality of people. Once they've consumed that art, they have some ideas in their head, and you want to change those ideas because they're not good ideas. You want to wake them up. You want the future to look better. You don't want people promoting bad mentalities. So you're not going to promote the people, you're not going to promote the art that of people who already died. You're not going to promote the art in the present, that the art done by people who have done immoral things. So you create a good scenario for the future, because that's what we want to do as the proposition today. We want to create a better world, and that's why we are very proud to propose.
I think the speaker could find speech, not to open a clash. Hello, you're here.
Just to make sure if I'm both visible and audible.
Yep, you're clear and visible.
Okay. 1 sec to pull up a timer. Time will start on my first word. Oh, before that, gender pronouns, she, her. I'll take verbal POIs, probably around 5 minutes if I have time, and please don't like spam with POIs. Panel. Prop looks at the question of immorality in today's debate far too simple. They look at the question as a matter of good or wrong, yet fail to realize the infinite number of uncontrollable external factors and consequences that artists have to face on a daily basis. Thus, I'm never a party to oppose. 4 characterizations before case, which I think is already able to largely frame out the entire prop case. Firstly, what are deeply immoral artists? I think that the phrase deeply immoral is something that is very arbitrary in and of itself. Throughout history and in different classes and different environments people grow up in, the definition as to what is considered deeply immoral are vastly different. In modern metrics, a vast majority of arts in the past are immoral because standards are really different back then. That is why in the past you have a lot of art romanticizing art, yet it still was justified in history. So if we take Prop's stance to say that we should also like ban and censor and not consume all art back in history that under modern metrics are considered as immoral, I think they have to defend a world with no art at all. But secondly, this debate is probably about artworks that are going to be fine because there's a symmetric incentive to ban out immoral content on both sides of the house, i.e. we're still going to censor fascism or racism in artwork. We're more than happy to take that stance. But do notice that this debate is a contextualization of many different narratives in society. That means that even at our worst, that we have immoral artwork, you still have other factors like education, social discourse, the idea that racism is widely accepted to be bad to counterbalance that out. You legit have cancel culture in if like a child, if an artist is shown to be a child molester or a pedophile, they're going to be hated in life anyways. So I don't see why that's unique under their side. That is why the example that they give you, like the example that they give you on Shane Dawson is extremely counterproductive because after it was found out that he did deeply immoral acts, there is cancel culture and a vast majority of people hate him already. So I don't see the nuance in their case. But thirdly, note that under both sides of the house, there are factors that condemn people who are immoral and counterbalance narratives that are generally considered oppressive because the very fact that society already thinks it's immoral means that they probably already largely condemn it. Also, notice that the inherent popularity of artists based on short-term booms and trends means that popularity fades out really quickly, and we would concede to the fact that impacts realistically are not going to be crazy big under both sides of the house. It is then Prop's burden to explain why there is a necessity of changing and spending so much resources to censor art and persuade people to not consume the art of immoral artists in the first place. But fourthly, Prop has the burden to concede to the fact that they're going to give up on a considerable amount of art. 3 reasons as to why that's true. Firstly, art is not the most popular career path in the status quo. We would say that in an increasing competitive society where like art in the status quo probably needs a lot of capital to like sustain, like a vast majority of people are not going to opt into art industry in the first place. And even if they are, they're going to be extremely elitist, whereas most elitist like families probably care more about education and going into sectors like STEM or politics. But secondly, do note that the industry is extremely competitive because there are only a certain amount of spots that you have under their side. Their definition of immoral, but thirdly, their definition of immoral is also based on perceptions of society because fundamentally, why we think something is immoral is because of social narratives that are enforced and indoctrinated upon us. Sorry, no, I'll take one at 5, stop it. Necessarily, I think that under their side, you have to give up art on artists like Michael Jackson or Justin Bieber because at those, like at times in society, they were seen as people who were deeply immoral and deeply like did very bad things. Given that, there's 3 things in my case. Firstly, on the principle of art for art's sake. Before anything, I think that human existence in the status quo is extremely stressful and pressuring in of itself because of like scarcity of resources in the status quo and scared of being outcompeted by automation, etc., etc. So everyone is pressured to explore a path that people did not in the past, which leads to much more uncertainty and much more pressure in the status quo compared to the past. That makes entertainment and attachment to things like art especially important right now where people are under immense pressure. When people are in the deepest trauma, you often want to like look at the artwork and listen to the music that author or artist that you're deeply emotionally attached to or you like their artwork. Notice that for there to be delta in this debate, there would be a significant amount of people who are attached to a certain artist that Prop is trying to condemn. I would say that even if we take them at their best and say that people do not care, at best they don't get access to their impacts, but they still have to tell you why it's necessary to be spending all those resources and all that time to be condemning them in the first place. But why then is the art why then is art the best medium for people to relieve pressure? That is because in the status quo, a lot of other things are commercialized and politicized and cannot be purely appreciated by like whether you're able to empathize with the author. So artists in the status quo is one of the best in like enjoying amusement because it's rarely politicized, and it's one of the like rare sectors that are not politicized right now. But then I would say that regardless of what the authors did, as long as the artwork can be a mean of comfort and a mean of happiness to the audience, we're willing to stand for it, and prop loses out on that comfort because under their side they're willing to like sacrifice a considerable amount of art. But secondly, on our second argument on inequality, I think it's rather likely that people growing up in slums are crowded out because at some point of their life, they would have been coerced by external forces to do something that's deeply immoral. Because literally, in the status quo, poverty is one of the main driving factors of crime.
I intervene.
You see that in developing, you do see that in less privileged areas, you have far more crime than in elitist areas. So like, for example, if a drug dealer points a gun at your mom and forces you to drug deal, then you're coerced into doing so because you love your mom. If you're Black and like someone like a police threatens your life, then at some point of your life you might have tried to tackle a police to make sure that you're not subjected to brutality. It's also far more likely they're going to do things like shoplifting or stealing if you're poor, and that are considered deeply immoral in the status quo because you're literally starving to death. So we say that under their side, they have to concede to the fact that they're going to crowd out disenfranchised artists, and that even if their ideas could be beneficial to society and does not fit to the social norms of good art. Because like at a point in their life, they would have been coerced to do something that's deeply immoral. But what then? Why then is this the most important kind of art in the status quo, and why is this able to win us the round? I think firstly, art needs diversity, right? In the status quo, a vast majority of the art that you have is extremely elitist and not reflective of problems in the status quo. We say that art from middle class or lower class artists is able to diversify the industry in the first place. No. But secondly, I think it's reflective of the status quo and social problems, which are not being seen by people right now, which under our side, we do not want negligence. Notice that art is oftentimes derivative of daily life. For example, music and paintings are often reflective of what the author has gone through or something that they observe in their life and in our society. So it's likely to have certain implications or critiques for the status quo and the structure that they live in. So we say that under their side, you crowd out those people facing disenfranchisement in the status quo and trying to actively voice out. I think it's far worse under their side. But thirdly, even at worst, when some art under our side is immoral, like it's still beneficial, because under our side, we would rather tackle and confront such controversy in discourse on like media or social media. And it's more important for us to realize and understand those issues in society. We cannot try to take a stance of negligence and try to avoid and mitigate the issues in history. It is only when we go back and reflect on the art that we are going to move on in society. And it's only when we have social discourse on what is considered immoral and you have more social spotlight to point out what is immoral to have actual social progress. For all the reasons above, never harder to oppose.
I think the speaker for fine speech, no text in the case for the government, DBM. You're here.
Yeah, just a few seconds, please. Okay, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. And the art is the artist's identity. When you are in the mall and you hear a song and you think, oh yeah, I know, this is Billie Eilish. Or when you talk to someone, oh yeah, I love Virginia Woolf's books. The artist is exposed through the art. The artists put themselves into the art, and so the art is correlated to the artist. That is the main difference, that is the main argument that opposition totally ignored. The artist is the art. It's that simple. So starting with my rebuttal, I have 7 points here. First of all, the artist is going to be hated anyway, they said. No, the artist is not going to be hated anyway. Let's look at the Travis Scott example and how 10 people were killed at his concert and he did absolutely nothing. He is still listened to this day. People don't care about that. And so on, the artist is not going to be hated anyway. Second of all, they say it's a competitive market, and it's not a competitive market. We've seen how the art market has expanded in the last years as never before. So with the growing market, it's not competitive. It's totally irrelevant. Third of all, popularity fades quickly. We see that's not the case with actual popular artists. as, I don't know, Taylor Swift or Ed Sheeran. They've been popular for years, and their popularity is not fading away. Rather, it's increasing. First of all, they said talk about Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson did absolutely nothing wrong. He explained all the situation that he was accused of, so that is irrelevant. Again, fifth point, if art can bring comfort and happiness, that means there is no problem. No, the thing is, if that artist caused pain, and if that artist exposes themselves through art, that is a problem here. No one will feel comfort while looking at Hitler's drawings, because people know what Hitler did. Everyone knows how his drawings look like. So you're not saying, oh yeah, look, such a beautiful painting. Look, yeah, the painting may look good, but that doesn't mean that people are going to like it. The people know what the artist did, and so they totally dislike and disagree with the artist. And everyone thinks that Hitler's paintings are bad because of Hitler, not because of how they actually look. Sixth point, the behavior is excused by the environment. Okay, well, if you steal from a shop when you are starving, that doesn't mean that's a deeply immoral act. You're playing on something else, and that is totally irrelevant to the actual motion. Deeply immoral act means you killed someone, okay? And that is not excused by environment. No, thank you. That is not excused by environment, and you can try to excuse that, but you will not reach anything. And the last point, seventh, art shows diversity. Art will present other classes. Okay, you can have all this representation and all this diversity without killers being praised, without killers being said about them that, oh my God, that's a great artist here. That person is totally great. Because when you say that, oh yeah, that music is really great, that means that artist is good. That means that person is good. So see, that's a correlation here. The artist is portrayed through art and vice versa. And so if you support art from bad artists, you're supporting the bad artists themselves. We already explained that on the first speaker, it didn't interact at all. So now, entering my rebuttal part, again, how would the world look like if we keep continuing the teaching? If you keep excusing everything, if you keep trying to find excuses for all those atrocities and present the people, this artist, as someone admirable, yes, I'll accept one POI.
All right, note that your word is highly uncomparative because we are still going to censor immoral artwork of itself. You have to tell us why, say, just a portrait of a lady by some really immoral artist is also
okay, I understood the point. Thank you for the POI. Okay, we both cancel problematic art, but you do not cancel problematic person, problematic people. If Taylor Swift now, let's take her for example. She uses her jet a few times a day to travel short distances. It's affecting hundreds of people, and especially now during the climate change, that's real bad. And so people do not care about that. People do not care about it. People do not point fingers at Taylor Swift and say she's a bad person. Everyone listens to her songs and doesn't even care at all. That means they are encouraging her to continue. No one is saying anything about that, so there's no problem there. See, Taylor Swift finds no problem in doing that. She will continue. She will harm more people, and by supporting that art, you are harming all those people that she's also harming. Because if you keep listening to her songs, that means she's a great person. She finds herself as a great person. So, continuing on, everything the proposition said was totally irrelevant. As we explained so many times on two speakers of how the art is correlated to the artist and how if you support the art, you support the artist. Do you really want to live in a world when crime is literally excused because, oh, but no, that is a great person. Travis Scott, the Travis Scott concert. 10 people died there and there were no consequences. Travis hadn't had any consequences. No one said anything about that, maybe for a few days, and then everyone ignored that. he's still having concerts to this day, and people are still supporting him and see him as a great person, even though he literally ignored the death of so many people. And the problem here is that artists are public figures. Public figures are idols. People see Travis Scott as their idol, and people say he's a great person. It doesn't matter. That was an incident years ago. No, it does matter. It does matter. Even if it was 100 years ago, if they did not address that issue at all, it's still an issue to this day. Okay, so an idol should be someone like, I don't know, Mitski, who stopped her concert when someone was feeling a bit sick. Not Travis Scott, who never stopped his concert while people were dying there. And so no, if we fight for a better society, we cannot call those people idols. If we fight for a better society where kids can develop, where people can actually grow harmoniously, we cannot portray those people, those problematic people, those killers, as someone who they should aspire to be, as someone who they should look up to, as idols. No, those we cannot call idols, and we should feel ashamed for portraying those as idols and for not calling those out. See? And we'll say it again. In conclusion, art and artists are the same thing. Artists portray themselves through art. They put themselves in the art that the people consume. And so if the people consume those art, if the people support the art, they also support the person themselves. And so we are promoting bad behavior here. If we really want to live in a better society, of course this house would never consume such arts, such types of arts that support deeply immoral acts. Thank you for the attention. Don't vote this if you care for a better society, and don't vote this if you don't want to ignore those problems. Thank you.
I think that Peter should find speech, no text in the case for the opposition. Opt to.
Great. I'll be preferring POIs verbally. Please don't badger. Please don't like ask a POI every 15 seconds. So yeah. All right. Given that, my time starts now. Panel, opposition believes that this debate today is fundamentally a marginal comparative between alternatives because the incentive and the ability to censor immoral art of itself is symmetrical to either side. It is really a comparative of alternatives of whether we want at cost of maybe a bit more attachment to the artist, better artwork, or whether we want to just be negligent to all the problems and choose to censor everything. I think the real tragedy that Proposition 2 reflects is the idea of negligence that people are willing to take towards as an attitude towards bad stuff. I think that bad stuff or bad ideals such as fascism doesn't just go away on Proposition case. What does change as a delta is that on Proposition case, less people are going to be informed of the idea of fascism existent, and less people are going to be talking about why it is bad, which is comparatively worse because that means more people are unaware of the harms that negative ideals and immoral actions can cause, and more people are possibly going to opt into it. I'm going to explain to you why pretty intuitively people are not going to personally opt into bad ideals on our side of the house, but note that 5 things are going to happen in my speech. First of all, I'll characterize to you what ground this debate happens under. No thank you. Second of all, I'll extend on why Proposition has to go radical in a very this house word motion. But third of all, I'll extend on art for art's sake. Fourth of all, I'll talk about why they get way higher barriers of art, which is not reflectant of social problems. But fifth of all, I'll engage with the best case scenario, which means that a possibility that people are going to be more attached to artists because they're more attached to artwork. The first thing about narratives is that they didn't anyhow respond to what my first opposition told you. Chinwe told you that we live in a multitude of narratives. In social narratives, where we have cancel culture. In social narratives, where we reject immoral actions such as killing, raping, and fascism. In social narratives, where the governments of either side of the house have the incentive to ban out negative content that is immoral and have the incentive to punish actions such as mass murder and punish actions such as child trafficking. The punishment on artists is going to be symmetrical. Moreover, the punishment on immoral art, such as a big swastika flag in the middle of an artist, is probably also going to be cancelled. The real comparative here is that they are going to have every single artwork of an artist cancelled out, no matter if that artwork itself is moral or not, just because they want less links with artists. No, thank you, don't badger. Note that when DPM tells you that no one, quote, will have comfort in Hitler fascism art, that is exactly the stance that opposition is willing to take. Because we regard that along with social moral education, people in society are generally able to distinguish the beauty of a neutralized piece of art between, like differentiated from the idea of a very, very immoral artist. Given this, the second thing I want to posit is proposition stance, right? Note that
May I
this is
intervene?
detailed what motion no thank you, which means that proposition would have to defend the feasibility of their policy. Realize that in the status quo, as I've already characterized, we have equivalent amounts of policies like banning out more immoral art of itself. But the difference here is that proposition would have to sacrifice additional resources to ban out every piece of artwork by an immoral artist that created immoral actions. This means that they were going to have way less examples of resources such as monetary funds toward art centers because they spent on the resources to other places. That means that finally in this debate, if you come to a neutralized impact
Yeah.
scenario, you vote for opposition because proposition gives up more opportunity cost. This is okay. Second of all, let's engage with their Michael Jackson example. They told you that eventually we found out that Michael Jackson is like clean and didn't actually do all that bad stuff, right? We're not sure if we found out, but we know that following their stance, the moment that Michael Jackson has been accused of doing child trafficking, probably they would have had to take down all of Michael Jackson's art for at least the time period of when we are unable to assure that Michael Jackson is a moral person. That means that for about 30 years, we're not going to see any piece of Michael Jackson's art on the market. And that is detrimental because I would say that if Michael Jackson's
May I
art was
intervene?
censored for 30 years, then probably after 30 years, nobody's really going to care about the artist. That means that because of their censoring policy, no matter if the artist is actually clean or not, upon accusal, you ruin the future possibility of the artist. Third of all, let's extend for the idea of art for art's sake. We notice that some art, we've noticed that art is still going to be largely existent on their side. The argument we want to give here is that art in very much instances are irreplaceable. Specific artworks mean specific meanings to specific humans that are irreplaceable by no matter what amount of other art. When I get home and I feel really depressed, I maybe just want to be like, if you listen to Thriller or just Beat It by Michael Jackson, and that has a different meaning to me than any other
Right.
piece of artwork. This argument is relatively marginal. I'm not going to try to analyze for you why millions of people are going to fall into depression on proposition because that's not realistic. I am going to tell you, though, that there are going to be more people in proposition personally attached to specific pieces of artwork who are going to be depressed in dark corners in their homes because their artwork has been censored and because they lose emotional attention. Before I move on to my fourth question, sure, go ahead.
All right, so people are gonna talk less about bad art because in our world, people are not incentivized to create bad art because it isn't consumed.
No, this is not about bad art. This is about incentivization of whether to do immoral actions. Symmetrically on either world, education tells people to not do immoral actions. That is literally irrelevant to our debate. Fourth question then, why they increase the barrier of art? Note that the proposition here just tells you that all immoral actions inherently mean immoral actions. They are unresponsive to Chingwei's analysis to you, while people who happen to be more disenfranchised happen to coincidentally also carry out more immoral actions. I don't think it's a coincidence by there. I think that when you are ending up in a slum where your government has failed you and a drug addict is pointing the gun at your mom saying that you have to help in drug trafficking or else you use a family member, the most disenfranchised people happen to be the ones who are most deprived of choices and who are most likely to plunge into immoralities. I think that is very important because they lose out on a lot of art carried out by these disenfranchised people. Why are they important then? Because we don't just want to see art by the elitists. We want to see art that reflects what a slum looks like. We want to see art that reflects what the worst living conditions on this planet looks like. We want to see art that actually makes people reflect, oh, there's a problem here in society. And they don't get that on their side because they have way too high barriers. Note that they just say that we're going to go away with the immoral actions. No, if somebody did an immoral action such as killing somebody, I'm pretty sure a legislative system is still allowed under an opposition stance. But lastly, let's engage with their best case scenario when they tell you that people are going to be more emotionally attached to art just because more artists just because of art. First of all, I would like you to note that it is untrue because unlike what they have characterized, I think that artists are very different from public figures and idols. With with idols, you learn to be like, you make them your role model. You follow their behavior. But rather with art, there's more attention on the artwork itself rather than on the artist. I care more about what Michael Jackson sings rather than what kind of person Michael Jackson is. That is the unique thing about art. What that essentially means is that the first thing of people attaching to artists because of art itself is false already. But even if that is true, we would rather have people look at centuries and millennia of art that maybe had reflected racial stereotypical norms and accuse them of being bad, and realize that we have been so oppressive in history, rather than staying negligent to such facts, rather than staying ignorant to the people that could still be carrying out these extremist ideals. We are much willing to engage with evil than to let it thrive. We are so proud to oppose.
I think the speaker felt fine speech. Now to summarize the case for the government, GovWeb here.
Let's look at just a portrait of some ladies. Let's look at Picasso's art. Let's look at the ladies that are depicted in that art. Let's look at the beauty of that art. But the beneath of it is that Picasso beat his mistress up, beat the very lady in that art up day on and day out, weeks upon weeks of physical and mental abuse. That is the beneath on which that art is based upon. For us to win, we have to prove that by not consuming the art based on immoral art, is that by not consuming it, we enforce a positive precedent. We enforce a precedent for artists who put their life and soul into their work, not to lose it by a simple immoral action. Another great example is Harvey Weinstein. Tons of movies that are based on abuse of young women, that are based on the abuse of those actors, and people remember this, and people should stop consuming those movies and have stopped consuming them because they know what happened. Now let's analyze the strategy of the oppositionist teams. First of all, they have explained to us how we want art for art's sake. Why? Because art has meaning, and that meaning is unique. But what if that unique meaning is hurtful to others? What if that unique meanings makes others' lives difficult? What if that unique meaning makes your life uncomfortable, hard? Then this is where we have to draw the line. And now for our rebuttals. First of all, we have to acknowledge that from the start, we set out and we defined what is deeply immoral. We set the stage. We told you that actions which impact the comfort of people, which impact their lives directly and which can change them, like that actions like rape, like abuse, like killings are objectively immoral actions throughout the centuries. They can be defined, as well as attacking other ethnic minorities' rights to living. Now, another point of rebuttal, we promoted a world in which the immoral art is not consumed. So therefore, there is no incentive for it to be created. So therefore, in the future, in the present, and in the past, it has been created less because people haven't consumed it. And you've talked about resources being consumed to make the public receptive to this call of action. You have agreed to play us on an alternate world. You have agreed to play us in this world where art that has immoral actions behind it is not promoted, where art that has these immoral acts doesn't exist or exist in the least bit. Now, you've told us that why would we promote art? Why would we promote the art that is good? Why would we not promote the art that doesn't have immoral artists beneath it? It would promote the moral artists, and it would create that better precedent. Now, you've talked about relieving pressure. You've talked about art and how it relieves pressure of people, how it makes people feel good. Let's see yourself as a consumer, listening to an artist, enjoying that artist's work, wanting to know more about him. But then you look into him, you look into his personal life, and you see all the bad stuff he did. You see that he abused numerous women, and you start to question yourself, what was I listening to? Well, in our world, that doesn't exist. In our world, you do not have the risk to consume it because there is no incentive for artists to create that art. And now to further on that point, what are the incentives of artists in general? Where first of all, it's success in their careers, rather from exposure or from money, and second of all is communicating a message to as wide of an audience as possible, to getting their inner feelings out there. And what happens when a famous artist commits a deeply immoral deed? Well, they get instant exposure. They get instant gratification of their art. Why? Because people keep searching that artist's name on the web. People start consuming that artist's art to see what happened. Who is that guy who raped that lady on that street? So even though that artist might go to prison, they still have the essence of their work, the essence of their being, the art that they created with all they had. They have it as something that gives them approval because it still is being listened to. It still holds the value that they want. And what does that do? It still reinforces their career. It still reinforces their inner sake as a person. They still consider themselves as a valuable individual to society. And what does that mean? That they find security in that art. They know that they can lash out and do something stupid, that they can lash out and commit an abuse. Why? Because when people have security in aspects of life, they tend to overuse it. If you live with your parents and you get all that you need, you get food, you get electricity, you get money, you're not incentivized to go out and work. You're not incentivized to go out and move out of your house because you're 30 and living with your parents. No, you're going to keep staying there because you get all that you need. And because artists' lives are so interlashed with their work, because artists and art are so interlinked, and because the artists see themselves in that art becomes the security to them.
Point.
And okay.
Even if Baby isn't censored, that does not stop Justin Bieber from being trialed to go to jail for 6 months because he took drugs. I don't see why you're not going to face consequences and push back to immoral acts under your.
Yeah, I got it. All right, but art still has an immense effect upon society. Artists still are important individuals in society that have important voices. And even though Justin might go to prison, he might come out and his art might still be intact. He might still go to concert and he still might improve his image on and on. The justice system works in both worlds. The thing is that immoral people in our world, immoral people that could be put on a pedestal because of their work, do not exist on our world because there is no incentive, because everybody who's been found out to commit those immoral deeds, who had art, well, they disappeared out of the public conscience. No one listened to them anymore. No one commented about their pictures. No one appreciated their work. So what do we need as a mechanism to stop that security, that link of security? Well, we need a mechanism, a social one based on morality that can get in the way of this security between the artist and their work, that can make artists try to think above only their art and try to behave normally, which they mostly do. But the thing is, when they don't have the security of their art, they're even more incentivized to keep it. So what does that do? It keeps them from lashing out and doing those stupid actions in the first place. And how do it impact that the present and future artists are incentivized not to do that, not to commit those crimes, not to rape or do other immoral actions, because they know that all that they have worked for can go to nothing, that all can go to waste because people won't listen to them. People won't listen to their messages. People won't listen to what they have had to say, even if it was valuable. So because we do not just want art for art's sake, because not every meaning is valuable to society, and not very underneath of a picture or an image from an artist is valuable, we as the proposition do not want immoral artists to have their works exposed.
I think the speaker could find speech. Now to summarize the case for the opposition of whip. Here.
Am I both visible and audible?
Yep, you're clear and visible.
Well, if I cut off in any second, just please verbally intervene with my speech. That'll be totally fine. So gender pronouns hear him, and then POIs, please do it in the chat box. I won't respond to any verbal POIs because that'll just ruin the flow of my speech. Okay, my time will start in 3, 2, 1, go. Side proposition thinks that every single individual in this world is deeply immoral to the point that they say that we should not listen to the song of anybody who goes on an airplane because they're polluting the environment. That sticks extremely ludicrous. I doubt the fact they're able to live up to their immoral standards, walk to school, rather than go on a bus on their side of the house because the bus would quote by quote contribute to global warming. I'm never prouder to oppose today's motion. I'll be doing 2 pieces of crucial clarifications, then I'll be asking 3 questions of crucial crystallization to summarize and clash up this debate for you and clear up why we win today's debate. Notice that we're going to censor immoral art, not art that is created by immoral artists. Instead of today's status quo, the government censors art that spreads racism, and even the miss someone cancel culture is already very rampant in society today, which will already cancel out the other art, which is extremely immoral that the government did not see, right? So, and people also not support this art by the basis. The world is characterized where people are not aware of this immorality at all, and they try to create this world which is extremely dystopian and is not true as the premise. But the second thing is that they tell us that Picasso beats up his mistress or his wife up in physical and mental abuse during the times that he created his art, right? Firstly, he was an extremely famous even under this premise of theirs at the house because his art provides actual crucial art techniques and people actually like it, right? So that also means that if the person is committing a lot of physical and mental abuse, this doesn't mean that he's going to portray it by any means through the art, right? We see his art as very, very positive and people enjoy it, right? If we do not know, if we just completely did not take his mental and physical abuse point out, we will already know that his art contributed a lot to today's modern art society. And second, they never explain how purchasing his art makes mental abuse run rampant in any person that's viewing the art by substantive, right? 3 questions of crucial characterization. The first question then is on which side gets more benefits for our consumers or portray better ideals in society, right? Why does this win us the round? They said that moral artworks on our side is going to make people think back and also feel bad because they might be one of the victims that were inside of this war, or one of the victims of Hitler's art in World War II regarding the people who are looking and consuming the art. But second, they say that if there's no controversy on immoral art on our side of the house, then this would incentivize the perpetuation of immorality through society in support of the person through purchasing his art. And then he gave this example of this person on YouTube or something, and a lot of people supporting him, right? Firstly, I would like to state that this is a very small fraction of society. If someone wants to be more famous in society, he'd probably make his art more moral and more to the standards of society in the premise. But second, even if people feel hurt looking at their art, it makes us realize that we need to try to start to actualize prevention over the actions that are depicted inside the art. So this is to say that if one person draws something that
intervene.
Sorry, I explicitly stated inside the chat, stop talking to me verbally. So basically, if someone tries to depict art that shows fascism, this also makes us try to prevent fascism in the future, right? That's something that we want to do in our side of the house. Not only is cancel culture going to deter these sort of things, it also teaches us important lessons, right? But second, finally, although Michael Jackson is accused of child rape, we do not see him depicting a sort of immoral act inside of his artworks, right? Instead, many of his albums are sharing positive attitudes where individuals enjoy listening to. For example, let's take this example of his album of Beat It, which Vincent gave you. Focus on avoiding violence by deliberately walking away from a fight. It doesn't talk about any sort of immorality or child abuse inside of it. But then they say that child lives are so artists' lives are so intervened with their work, so we stop supporting their work. It also equally talks about how we would deter them from making even other sorts of immoral art that in the future. This is false, since let's say that even if this artist tried to turn from a person that deals atrocities to a person that spreads positivity, right? If he has the incentive to do so, if we just take the judgment of his past atrocities and judge him or her on this, they will simply de-incentivize them from trying to become a better and more perspective artist and perpetuate them to make even more immoral acts and more irrational acts, because this is a way of paybacking to society and on their side of the house. They characterize them as the world in which people purchasing all of the art that the author provides is equal and parallel to supporting them. This is absolutely ludicrous because people still purchase Picasso's work even if he abuses his mistress, right? Because his art is something that spreads positivity and makes people spreads happiness through it. The second question I'd like to ask is which side gets more influential art on net? We told you three things. First, the general trend of art is going to be more conservative and unable for people to improve their bad regulations or decisions that humanity has done in past or reflective. But second, the poor population who are coerced into moral acts, for example, robbing because you're going to starve to death, you get far less exposure to those people and to structural issues that is reflected in their artwork because their art is literally censored. But finally, we're going to be taking a stance which we are willing to take a stand to allow immoral art than to take a stance of negligence. Because under both sides of the house, you still have people who are dealing immoral acts, being fascist or racist. The problem under proposition is that you directly censor everything problematic, so nobody understands about it. The difference under opposition is that you get social discourse, so more people know about immoralities. We would say that there's other narratives, for example, like nationalism or white supremacy that perpetuate inequality. We are the only ones who are dealing with this issue. All proposition does is negligence. Why does this swing us around? They say when you fund these artists, this gives them the biggest platform is for them to spread immoral things because this art itself is going to present the person or to talk about their ideas. For example, like their example was on Shane Johnson and how like people were consuming the art were actually becoming him, right? We would say that we're definitely going to censor art that is immoral coming out of artists, no matter if it is immoral on or not on their side of the house. What we're simply saying is that if the artist himself is immoral, but his art conveys a positive idea or an idea that makes us go back in history and reflects what we have done, which assists societal development in any means, I do not see what is wrong with this. And even if it reflects like some sort of immorality, people are probably like cancel culture will already deal with this, right? What the weighing here is as follows. On their side of the house, people can try to set up types of moral standards to try to boycott other artists and also make their art get censored in general on their side of the house. All they all they try to do is try to characterize these artists as a child rapist or as a person that committed war atrocities in order for his life to be damned forever and his artworks falling because it doesn't deal with morality. But second, on the weighing and the comparative on our side, only when the very moral arts that are going generally like very generic and going to follow the basic moral standards agreed by the public are violated or subjective, we would try to ban this on opposition. This makes people being able to express their ideas and also feel able to convey their ideas to feel more free when they're trying to create art by the premise, because this is what speaks for innovation and what sparks ideas for human innovation. Therefore, we win the second question. But the final question I'd like to ask is whether immoral artists are going to have immoral values reflected in their art pieces, right? We told you that prop loses out on comfort for art that provides to the people. Why do we win this? They say that, their stance was that they do not want to promote immoral art, which are created in the present and are the people that have died in the past.
I intervene.
Detrimental. I said like POIs in the chat. I don't know why you're still asking it. Firstly, I don't understand how people who have died is like unbeneficial to societal development. That is just ludicrous. I would say that looking at art in the past assists us to not make the same misconceptions or the same issues, and that's exactly the reason why you see people being able to reflect the faults on the same on the things that happened in the past and improvise your quality of life in the status quo. That is why humanity is moving on at the very moment. But second, let's take their best case in today's debate. We would say that the artist being influential by the artist being influenced by cancel culture will also try to control their art into a certain value that would not be extremely immoral to the extent that people in general would feel like extremely violated or feel extremely unhappy about it, right? Because they want to gain revenue. So if they do that, cancel culture or the YouTube algorithm itself is already going to deter this when it's sending it inside of the platform. So even if there's artists which are immoral and try to create immoral art, cancel culture already resolves this issue. But then they say that art equals to identity and the ideas are expressed into the art, right? We would say that just because the artists have committed atrocities or supports fascism by any means, it's not like every single piece of their pieces of art would reflect his ideals on fascism. That is some misconception that that proposition makes in today's debate. He would also have the other perspectives that have no correlation with immorality or his art that's appreciated by the public, right? We would say that many pieces of art, although the person creating it is extremely immoral, people are appreciating it and still purchasing it in the status quo. Because we win over all three classes and we explain to you why the mechanism and our side weighs over them, we're extremely proud to stand in opposition. Very proud, to oppose. Thank you.
I think the speaker will find speech not to end the opposition's case. I'll reply here.
All right. Just to check again, am I visible and audible?
Yep, you're clear and visible.
Great. Given that, my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. I think proposition's inability to respond to any of our contextualization on top of their inability to explain to you any of their impacts loses them the round. If their impact of Justin Bieber being glorified to some extent is the size of this phone, then our impacts of you missing out on artworks of Picasso, of Justin Bieber, and of Michael Jackson is the size of the room that I stand in. Even if you take the best case scenario of their case, their impacts stand no chance to what they will lose out on. 3 questions that I want to ask in my speech. First of all, what is the easiest place that you vote off for opposition today? In the past, or throughout the past, Chingwei and Brian have told you that because of monarchical systems, because of general low awareness for systems of morality, because of general slight disregardance for like moral actions, we saw that a lot of past artworks were based off immoral artists. Probably Egyptian art was immoral because they adopted slavery. Probably the Greek art was immoral because they killed a ton of people. Probably also because they killed Socrates. Probably Picasso's art was immoral because, like Prop Whip just characterizes to us, in that time they didn't have that high of a regard for moral. What that means is that all of the preserving art that lasts until the status quo that came from the past is likely to be destroyed by proposition or at best censored. But second of all, let's talk about the present and the past. What art do you lose out on in the present and from out the past? First of all, you lose out on a lot of art from minority communities who have been coerced into immoral actions, who have been more prone to immoral action because of negligence of their society. But you also lose out on people like Michael Jackson, who are suspected and accused of being immoral. So even if we can find out that he's not immoral 40 years later, we probably lose out on his art because 40 years of neutralized popularity is enough to take down a piece of art. Why is this important? Because even if we take the best case scenario of their impact, even if we assume that sure, we're going to glorify some really, really immoral people, I think that that doesn't compare that much because they never told you why we're going to positively glorify them. Even if we say they're a great artist, I think we can still say that they're a terrible husband as example. But the comparative here is that art as a hobby for people listening is greatly increased and art as a profession to study off is greatly increased. I'm really unsure of how art would develop if artists in the status quo do not have a reference figure of Picasso's lines as example. Second of all, deposit three things that we talked to you about again in the narrative, none of them responded to. First of all, I think either side has the incentive to ban immoral actions, and under a legislative figure, we're probably going to like lock up a rapist on our side too, right? But second of all, note that immoral art itself is also going to be censored on either side because the motion explicitly says that we're talking about neutralized art by immoral artists. But third and most importantly, note that the social discord and general information provided to us in current educational systems probably tells us what is immoral and that we should not pursue immoral stuff. It is really unreasonable to me why they say on proposition that people just because of liking one piece of music will opt into immoral narratives that clashes them against society. That leads me to my third question. To what layer do we tackle immorality? Here's the case. Even if proposition can argue to you that you get more awareness about immoral actions because you listened right to an immoral, like to a neutralized piece of art and then looked at, like Googled up this immoral artist, they get more awareness. Sure, take their best case scenario. We say that that is still good because giving my contextualization to you about why society generally tells you what is immoral, I think it is only probable that more people are going to actively go against that artist on our side of the house, are going to realize how bad the artist is upon not censoring the artwork. Because people are going to realize, oh, that this person is actually negative, they actually by themselves realize what negativity is still in society and what we should fight up against. Art around the world, and no matter in what form they are portrayed, is a light shedding onto the life of the status quo. If we choose to ignore the dark bits of life, then I think that that is a very tragic stance I am so proud to oppose.
I think the speaker for fine speech. Now to end the whole debate, Gov reply. You're here.
Yes, just a moment, please. Okay, I'll start in 3, 2, 1, and not only was the proposition's theme totally unreasonable, this match they didn't interact with our case, none of the points we made, they only, in the rebuttal, they only commented things we never brought up, things they adapted of what we said to make their stance easier, and also they even contradicted themselves so many times talking about cancel culture and how this will solve the problems, but we are talking exactly about cancel culture here, so that doesn't mean anything. Also, they brought up Michael Jackson on all three of their speeches, even though Michael Jackson is totally irrelevant to all of this because we have no actual proof. So let's take for example and compare the two worlds, the one of the proposition, one of the opposition. Starting with the opposition's world, their world would look exactly like this one, as nothing ever happens regarding the people that do terrific acts. And so more bad behavior will continue to go on. People will not actually realize that what the artists are doing, what the problematic artists are doing, is actually bad, because no one is calling them out. They don't suffer anything. There are no consequences. So of course, the people see no problem in all of this. As we mentioned earlier, in some speeches, Travis Scott ignored the killings of 10 people at his concert. That's not a person we should ever call an idol. That's not a person we should ever look up to. And those murders, those people, those families didn't get their justice. Why? Because everyone is ignoring the problem. Everyone is trying to make up excuses to defend Travis. And that is not what we're doing here, because people are subjective. People will defend their favorite artists, even if they're doing atrocities, because they are subjective. As we mentioned, all of this still didn't interact with this, and they even said that they, people will understand these issues more, even though they don't address them at all. So that doesn't make any sense at all. And then look at our world, look at the propositions world here, and how things will evolve. Okay, what was done in the past was done in the past, but we still have preferred now no one to die, no one to be abused by Picasso, then used his artwork, then use all of those techniques that we would have found out about eventually. We didn't need Picasso for those techniques, we would have found them anyway. So that's totally irrelevant. And on our world, we will build a better world. People will actually understand all those issues, all those problems that those public persons, public images will do, all those bad behaviors, because we will actually address them. We will build a better society, a less problematic society, where people's rights will not be cut off just because someone popular did something problematic and everyone is defending that person. We will not stop normal people from getting their justice just because someone is popular. We need everyone to be equal. We need everyone to understand those issues, and we need to treat everyone equally in order to build a better society. If we really wish for a better society, we need to address all those issues, no matter what. Not like the opposition is doing, hiding from them, never addressing them, and they somehow still manage to say they will evolve in some way, even though they brought no mechanistic over this. And so, of course, we are winning this round. Of course, we are winning this match because we can actually show impact. We can actually bring impact and say that on our side, we have the guarantee that society will change to better. But on their side, there is nothing. There's nothing. The society will evolve only as it will stagnate, and then we will go downhill because no one is addressing any issues whatsoever. Thank you. Never been prouder to propose.
I think the speaker for the fine speech. Debaters, you may have